You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we have a rare glimmer of good news here, and this comes amid the backdrop of Donald Trump's DOJ insisting that the acting FBI director, Brian Driscoll, fire a number of agents who were involved in these January 6 prosecutions. But that's not what he actually did. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, Brian, it looks like the resistance from within Donald Trump's own executive branch is building. The acting director of the FBI, Brian Driscoll, who is pretty widely known to be, pretty conservative. And let's face it, Donald Trump just made him acting director of the
Right.
FBI. When the White House, when the Department of Justice said, first of all, we are looking to push out, to fire, if you don't retire in the coming days, some of the top executives, the upper echelon of the FBI, I think 8 people in particular. The new reporting is a number of them did self-select. They retired. They ran away before they could be axed. But here is the really important part, and I want our viewers to hold fast to this because it's a really good and important development. The Department of Justice, at the White House's urging, told acting director Driscoll, and we want the names of the 1,000 or more agents who worked on J6 cases and a couple of other cases. And so reportedly, Driscoll is resisting. He's saying no, because Brian, let's remember, these attempted firings, if they go through, are lawless. There are procedures in place at the FBI, as in every agency. Before you can terminate somebody, there has to be a reason. It has to be performance-based. There are hearings. There is due process, the Supreme Court said, before you can fire somebody from the federal government. And the Trump administration is ignoring and violating all of it. So here is the one thing I want to read from the brand new NBC News reporting. This is a message that reportedly is being circulated by FBI agents within the FBI, describing how acting director Driscoll is standing up to the Department of Justice and the White House. Quote, bottom line, DOJ came over and wanted to fire a bunch of J6 agents. Driscoll is an absolute stud, held his ground, and told White House proxy DOJ to F off. Brian, I have to tell you, I've been struggling in recent days with what's happening to my friends and former colleagues at both the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI. This is good news. This is important news. And, what I will say is the FBI, the agents of the FBI, the good men and women out there fighting for us every day, protecting the American people, they know lawlessness when they see it. And they're seeing it coming out of the White House and Trump's leadership at the Department of Justice. These are not the kind of people, I worked with them, who will just lay down and take this lawlessness. So everybody should, hold fast to that. We need to support our FBI agents, our DOJ prosecutors, our January 6th prosecutors, because this is far from over.
Glenn, with that said, Brian Driscoll's not going to be FBI director or acting as FBI director for long. If Kash Patel is able to succeed with his confirmation, how will things change? Because this isn't somebody who seems, at least overtly, like he's a guy who's on the team, who respects precedent, who's there to protect the FBI agents. He seems like somebody who wants to tear the whole thing down. I mean, he himself has said, even though he won't admit it during these confirmation hearings, that he wants to turn the FBI headquarters into a museum of the deep state. So how do things look in the event that Kash Patel becomes confirmed as FBI director?
Not great. It looks like, the danger to the American people will increase if Donald Trump and his henchmen are allowed to just, get rid of large swaths of FBI agents who did what? They investigated the crimes we all saw with our own eyes.
And by the way, crimes that were validated by virtue of grand juries voting out the indictments and regular juries, at least in the case of New York, voting for the conviction itself.
Brian, and we saw it with our own eyes. We saw them assaulting police officers, breaching the Capitol, bashing in windows, hunting for elected officials up to and including the Vice President, Mike Pence. We saw the crimes. And for Donald Trump and his henchmen to say the investigators and the prosecutors who brought those folks to justice for the crimes we all saw need to be punished. That is another flavor of obstructing justice. You are retaliating against people for enforcing the laws of our nation. This will not end well for Trump and his henchmen. I predict it's not going to be fast, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be painless. But I don't think this will end well. And here's the thing, Brian. The FBI agents and the federal prosecutors, I kind of lump them together because it's the FBI that investigated the J6 crimes and the federal prosecutors, as members of that team, prosecuted the January 6th insurrectionists. They were directed by the leadership of the Department of Justice, both the FBI agents and the prosecutors, to do precisely what they did. Investigate in the grand jury, follow the facts, apply the law, and if the evidence supports indictments, return indictments, go to trial, win convictions if the evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for those insurrectionists who attacked the Capitol. You cannot now use any of that as a basis to terminate them. It's wrongful, it's unlawful, it's dangerous, it's contrary to a healthy American democracy. And I don't want to get in front of our skis because the fight is just beginning, but I do not believe this will end well, and I do not believe the FBI will lay down or the federal prosecutors will lay down to Trump's attempted lawlessness.
Glenn, in the event that you have somebody like Kash Patel who comes in, who of course is just completely deferential to Trump and only Trump, and yet you have even right-wing FBI agents, or in this case, an acting FBI director, who are clearly deferential to his own colleagues, how does that resolve itself? Like, let's say, for example, Kash Patel does decide to accede to the demands of the DOJ and hand over names. Do you think that we're going to see even the right-wing prosecutors stand up for the rest of their colleagues in this office? Like, what could this look like?
You know, I trust the men and women of the FBI, and I think when Acting Director Driscoll just stood up to the attempted lawlessness of Trump and his DOJ henchmen and stood up for the agents who did their job, and they did it lawfully, honorably, and in accordance with the Constitution, I don't think if Kash Patel comes sauntering in, wearing his Kash, Fight with Cash, wearing his Fight with Cash merch, his fetching scarf and his Cash Punisher socks, which you can get on his website. All the best FBI directors have their own merch shops online.
Right, of course.
And he comes sauntering in, and he now tries to do what Driscoll refused to let the White House and the Department of Justice do to the good men and women of the Justice Department. Guess what? My money is riding on the thousands and thousands of FBI agents, not on Kash Patel. How does it resolve itself? Impossible to say, but I don't think if Kash Patel comes in and tries to be Donald Trump's hatchet man, the FBI agents are going to lay down and take it. I think at a minimum, they're going to flood the courts with winning wrongful termination suits because they have not been given the due process the Supreme Court said they're entitled to before being terminated, and they're not going to win this in the long run. There's going to be a lot of pain and angst and confusion in the short run, which is exactly what Trump is trying to do to the 2.1 million strong civil service corps, federal government employees. But I don't think it's going to turn out well for Kash Patel or Trump.
Glenn, let's finish off with this. Notably, Brian Driscoll wasn't fired as acting FBI director when he rebuked the DOJ in its offer, in its request for these names. Why do you think that was? Knowing that this is an administration that values loyalty, fealty to the God King above all else, why can they suffer this very public rebuke, which has gotten a lot of media attention, and still not go down the route of just purging the FBI of this guy?
It's a great question, but it may be one of timing, Brian, because whereas Acting Director Driscoll is standing up for the men and women of the FBI against, DOJ's attempted lawlessness, wrongful terminations of them, the reporting is that Driscoll was given until Tuesday. So he's got some more time before he is required to hand over the names. Now, the reporting is he's not going to hand over the names, but the deadline has not yet arrived. So, listen, you've heard me say this before. My viewers have heard me say this before. I'm not a betting man. I'm not a high roller. $1 is my betting limit. Sadly, I would put a good 75 cents of that max bet on Driscoll being removed from the position of acting FBI director, maybe another attempted wrongful termination. And Brian, I hate to say this, but I feel compelled to, maybe even worse. Who knows if they don't try to initiate a criminal investigation for him resisting Donald Trump's efforts to wrongfully terminate 1,000 or more FBI employees. And this is where there is a bedrock principle that comes into play. I was taught it in the Army when I served on active duty. It was reinforced to me when I left active duty military and joined the Department of Justice. Whether it comes from a military commander or a supervisor at the Department of Justice, we must disobey unlawful orders. And I expect the men and women of law enforcement to disobey, to resist, to oppose any lawlessness that comes their way from the White House or Donald Trump's henchmen at the DOJ.
Glenn, do you think it would be a fair assessment to think that if Brian Driscoll is willing to speak out now when asked for an improper order from the DOJ, that this would also be somebody who's willing to not lie down, to your exact point, if he is contending with an unlawful termination?
You know, I don't know Driscoll personally, but what I will say is we have fought difficult battles in America, and what has emerged is really good, strong, determined men and women who care about, doing what's right. And I hope and even expect that Driscoll will be one of those people, and we will add his name to the list of folks who acted heroically, maybe against all odds, maybe in the face of a president of the United States breathing down their necks. I hope and I expect he will do the right thing.
All right, well, look, this is an important story, and it's one where we don't have a resolution yet. So we'll keep an eye on this for the next few days as soon as we have any update as to whether the DOJ is going to back down, whether the acting FBI director is going to back down, or whether Kash Patel is confirmed and has some say in all of this at the end of the day. We'll stay on top of it. So for those who are watching right now, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.